What does it mean to call a garden shed home? Not a cozy cabin, not some Pinterest-worthy tiny house, but a cold, uninsulated shed behind a stranger's backyard. My name is Helena Brooks, and for 7 years, that's where I lived. Just me and my twin boys, Evan and Tyler. People hear homeless and think tents or crowded shelters, but it can look like this too. Raising 2 children in 80 square feet with no plumbing and 1 working outlet. You want to know how we got here, how we survived, and what came next? Sit down. I'll tell you everything. We moved into the shed when Evan and Tyler were just 5 years old. At that age, they thought it was an adventure. To them, it was our secret clubhouse, a never-ending camping trip. They didn't see the cracks in the plywood walls or feel the panic that came with every cold night. But I did. I saw everything. The rusted-out metal door that didn't quite close, the mildew creeping in after every rain, the one outlet that barely worked, the absence of a bathroom, a kitchen, a bed that wasn't just a thin mattress on the floor. It wasn't a home, it was a last resort. $50 a month to sleep behind someone else's garage. No lease, no rights, no comfort. But it was what I could afford when my marriage collapsed and my savings vanished overnight. I had no family to turn to, no place to land. All I had were my 2 boys and the weight of keeping them safe. People imagine homelessness as someone sleeping on a sidewalk or living out of a car, but there are so many faces to it. Mine looked like clocking in for back-to-back shifts, showering at gas stations, and smiling like nothing was wrong while packing school lunches made of crackers and peanut butter. I lied to my kids every day, told them we were saving up for something special. I made it sound exciting, like this was just a temporary stop on the way to something better. Because if I broke down, if I told them the truth, I knew they would break too. Inside that shed, I made it work. I cut up old pillowcases to make curtains, found milk crates for storage, and set up a tiny microwave from the dollar store. At night, I'd wrap Evan and Tyler in my coat just to keep them warm. I didn't sleep much. I couldn't. I lay awake listening to the wind, the silence, the occasional creak of the walls, praying that nothing would go wrong, because there was no safety net. Still, I smiled every morning. I kissed their cheeks, packed their backpacks, slipped little notes into their lunch sacks. You are brave. You are loved. You can do anything. Those words were my promise to them, that I would not let our situation define their future, that somehow, in the middle of all that lack, they would still know abundance, of love, of care, of belief. That shed became more than shelter. It became a place where I taught my boys about resilience, about what it means to hold on when everything tells you to let go. It was miserable, yes, but it was also filled with quiet victories, measured not in money or comfort, but in the way we kept going, together. And that was where something started to grow. Not just survival, but the beginnings of something deeper, something stronger, something that might one day look like hope. Every day in that shed began before the sun rose. I'd wake at 4:30 a.m., careful not to make a sound. The mornings were brutal, especially in winter. I'd plug a kettle into our single working outlet to heat a bit of water, then wash myself in a plastic tub. No luxury, just necessity. I'd braid my hair, apply a bit of dollar store mascara, and head out to catch the 5:15 bus to my first job at the diner. By the time Evan and Tyler woke up, I was already gone, but they were never forgotten. I left everything ready for them. Cereal boxes lined up on a crate, 2 bowls, clean clothes laid out, and a whiteboard checklist written in blue marker. Brush your teeth, eat breakfast, pack your bag, wait by the mailbox for Miss Linda. Miss Linda was the woman who owned the main house. She didn't say much, never invited us inside, but she watched the boys from a distance to make sure they got on the bus. She wasn't warm, but she wasn't cruel. Just someone who didn't know what to do with people like us. After the diner, I'd head straight to my second job stocking shelves at the grocery store. Then it was back to the diner for the evening cleanup shift. I was always moving, always working, but no matter how long the day, I always came home. We ate dinner on the floor, sometimes just cup noodles, sometimes canned beans with a slice of bread. On better days, if tips were good, I brought back rotisserie chicken or a bag of frozen vegetables. I turned it into a picnic, pretended we were camping under the stars. After dinner, we did homework by the light of a single desk lamp. They'd read aloud while I folded laundry, and I checked every assignment, even when I could barely keep my eyes open. Then came bedtime stories. Not just any stories, ones I made up about space pirates and secret gardens, twin brothers who could fly. In those stories, we weren't cold, we weren't broke. We were kings, inventors, heroes. Some nights, I cried once they were asleep. Quiet tears, hidden behind the insulation I'd stapled to the walls. But even then, one thing never changed. My sons never went to bed feeling unloved. Not once. I made sure of it, because survival wasn't just about keeping them fed or warm. It was about keeping their spirits intact, about shielding them from the heaviness I carried every day. Love became my strategy, my anchor, my way of saying, no matter how small this space is, you are safe here, you are seen, you are enough. That was our life, not glamorous, not easy, but real, raw, and full of a quiet kind of strength that only love can create. The first time someone told me my boys were gifted, I laughed. Not because I didn't believe in them, I always did, but because gifted felt like a word meant for someone else's children. Kids with clean shoes and quiet bedrooms. Kids who didn't live in sheds. It was Evan's second-grade teacher who said it. She pulled me aside after school one day, her face serious but kind. "Helena," she said, "your son has a mind for numbers I haven't seen in 2 decades." I thought she was just being polite, maybe trying to give me something to feel good about. But a month later, Tyler's reading scores came back, 3 grade levels ahead. Suddenly, the school psychologist got involved, then the principal, then a counselor who wanted to evaluate them for a gifted program across town. I didn't understand any of it at first. I mean, sure, they asked a million questions, tore through every book they could get their hands on, loved puzzles. But in our world, special didn't come with opportunity. It came with cost, time, transportation, energy. I wasn't sure I had left. But they got in. A magnet school with a rigorous STEM curriculum, known for shaping brilliant young minds. Full tuition, but no transportation. It was 17 miles away. I cried when I got the acceptance letter. Not tears of joy, fear. How was I supposed to get them there? For weeks I figured it out. I took 3 buses each way, starting at 4 a.m., changing lines downtown, and walking the last mile through gravel roads and industrial lots. I walked them to the school gate, kissed their foreheads, then turned around and did the whole thing in reverse to get to work. I didn't have a car. I didn't have help. But I had something stronger. Refusal. A refusal to let poverty be the reason my boys stayed small. They had been given a door I never got. I wasn't about to let it close. Their teachers started calling. They asked questions no one else thinks to ask. They finish their work early and help other students. They're kind, always respectful. Then, one day, a letter came from the state. Both Evan and Tyler had qualified for early STEM scholarships. They were 9 years old. Nothing changed at home. We still lived in that shed. Still boiled water to wash. still heated soup in the microwave. But something inside me shifted. For the first time, I didn't just see my boys as survivors. I saw them as builders, as thinkers, as kids who might grow up and change things, not just for themselves, but for others too. And I told them that. You don't have to become rich, I said. Just stay kind, stay curious, keep helping people. They nodded, and from that moment on, their dreams weren't just about escaping the shed. They were about building something better. Not just for us, but for everyone who had ever felt stuck in a place they didn't belong. Getting into the gifted program was one thing. Getting there every day was another. 17 miles stood between my boys and the school that could change everything. And we had nothing but a single outlet in a shed and my determination to make it work. So, I did what I always did. I adapted. I started waking up at 3:45 a.m., packed their lunches in the dark, toasted bread over a hot plate, filled water bottles. Then, bundled in layers, we stepped out into the cold and caught the first of 3 buses. We rode in silence most mornings, still half asleep, the boys leaning against me as we bumped along the early streets. Then came the downtown transfer, rushing to catch the second bus before it pulled away. And finally, the last mile on foot, past warehouses, gravel lots, chain-link fences. It wasn't safe, and it wasn't easy, but it was what we had. Sometimes we'd arrive just before the bell, sometimes late, but we showed up, every day. When I dropped them at the school gate, I'd watch them walk inside, backpacks bouncing, heads high, and even though my feet ached and my coat was too thin, I'd feel something like pride bubbling up through the exhaustion. That commute became our ritual. It was grueling. I lost hours of sleep, missed shifts, wore through the soles of my shoes in just 2 months. But it was worth it, because those long mornings taught my boys something I couldn't give them with words alone. They saw what it looked like to show up for the things that matter, to work for a future that isn't promised, to keep going even when your body screams to stop. And they never once complained. They did their homework on the bus, read books aloud to each other in waiting shelters, memorized multiplication tables while we walked that last gravel stretch. I'll never forget the day it snowed, hard, unexpected, heavy. We stood at the second bus stop, shivering, soaked through. I looked at Evan and Tyler, blue-lipped and quiet, and for a moment I almost broke. I almost turned around. Then Tyler looked up and whispered, "We're still going, right?" And Evan nodded. "Yeah, Mom, we're okay." That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about school. It was about teaching them what's possible when you refuse to fold. Every step we took, every early morning, every missed paycheck, it was all an investment. Not in some distant, abstract future, but in 2 boys who believed that effort could change everything. And then, just when I thought we couldn't go any further, someone noticed. Not just the boys, but us. And what came next would change everything. He came in every Tuesday, same table, same order, black coffee, rye toast, scrambled eggs soft. I didn't know his name, just that he wore the same windbreaker, tipped in exact change, and kept mostly to himself. I'd smile, refill his cup, thank him politely, then move on. He never lingered, until one morning, he did. I brought his check like always, ready to turn away, but he looked up and said, "You have a very kind way about you, Helena." I smiled, unsure how to respond. "Thank you, sir. I appreciate that." Then came the question that stopped me cold. "Do your boys go to Lakeside Academy?" I froze. "Yes," I said slowly. "They just started." He nodded. "I volunteer there, math enrichment program. Evan and Tyler, bright kids." My throat tightened. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. He smiled gently. You've raised them well. I thought you should hear that. I thought that was the end of it. A kind word, a rare acknowledgement. But the next Tuesday, he returned with more than compliments. He brought a folder. Inside was a letter, official, on Lakeside Academy letterhead. It offered both boys full scholarships. Not just tuition, but laptops, school supplies, uniforms, and best of all, transportation. I stared at the paper, afraid I might smudge the ink just by holding it too tightly. How? I began, but he raised a hand. You didn't ask for help. That's what makes this matter more, he said. The school has a discretionary fund. I just made sure the right people saw your sons. I cried in the walk-in freezer for 20 minutes that day. Couldn't hold it in. Not because of the generosity, but because someone saw us. Someone looked past the worn uniform, the tired eyes, the rush of the workday, and saw a mother trying to hold everything together. A week later, a van from the school began picking Evan and Tyler up every morning. They came home with gym shoes that fit, backpacks with zippers that worked, hot lunches they didn't have to feel ashamed of. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe. But it didn't stop there. Word began to spread. A woman from a local nonprofit showed up at the diner one afternoon. She'd heard about us through the school and wanted to help. She helped me apply for a transitional housing program for working single parents. 3 months later, we moved into a small apartment. Real walls, real plumbing, real privacy. The boys each had their own bed. I had a door I could close at night. We still didn't have much, not furniture, not savings, but we had space, safety, a beginning. And it all started with a quiet man in a windbreaker and a moment of kindness that rippled outward, changing everything it touched. The apartment wasn't fancy. 2 small bedrooms, faded carpet, a kitchen counter that sloped like it had given up years ago. But to us, it was a palace. For the first time in years, we had heat, we had light, and we had space to exhale. The boys ran through the hallway their first night like it was a racetrack. Tyler claimed the smaller room, said it felt cozy like a fort. Evan lined his books on the windowsill like they were museum pieces. I sat on the floor with a blanket and just watched them, smiled, breathed. We didn't have furniture at first, just some folding chairs someone left by the dumpster and a donated table from the nonprofit. But that didn't matter. What mattered was what that space gave us: dignity, safety, and the feeling, finally, of being home. With that little bit of breathing room, I allowed myself to dream again. Not big, not reckless, just forward. I signed up for one-night class at the community college, Intro to Small Business. I had no idea what it would lead to. I just knew it was time to start investing in myself, even if it was just 1 credit at a time. The boys were thriving. Their teachers sent home glowing reports and little notes about their leadership in class. Tyler built a wind-powered generator out of soda cans for the science fair. Evan started a book club with 3 other kids and called it Pages and Pizza. They met every Thursday after school. Their minds were growing, yes, but so were their hearts. They were kind. They were generous. They helped classmates. They remembered to ask how my day was. I eventually left the diner, found part-time work at a small local bakery. The pay was less, but the hours were regular, and the owner, Cynthia, was the kind of woman who understood what it meant to struggle and survive. She taught me how to bake from scratch, gave me day-old loaves to take home, lent me books on marketing and small business. I kept that old notebook from the shed, the one where I scribbled down dreams in between bills and bus schedules. I added new goals: save $2,000, launch a home baking business, buy a second-hand car. Some took months, others years. but I checked them off one by one, each mark of victory carved out of the grind. By year 3, we had a couch. By year 4, a car with working heat. By year 5, Helena's Hearth, my tiny home baking business, had its own stall at the Sunday market. We weren't rich, we weren't flashy, but we were stable. And there's a kind of peace in that I never knew existed. The kind where the floor doesn't feel like it might fall out from under you at any moment. Where you can make plans, where you can rest. And sometimes, when the world was quiet, I'd watch my boys sleep. One dreaming of rocket engines, the other of library shelves, and whisper, "We did it. We really did." Time has a way of softening the edges. One minute you're patching holes in a shed wall with duct tape, and the next, your sons are taller than you, borrowing your car, outgrowing shoes every few months. Our little apartment eventually became too small for their dreams, but it had done its job. It held us while we healed. Evan graduated first. High honors, full scholarship to a state university. He wanted to study architecture, said he dreamed of designing schools that felt safe and welcoming for every kid. Tyler followed 2 years later, robotics and engineering. The boy who once took apart our toaster just to see how it worked was now getting paid to innovate. I wore the same blue dress to both their graduations. It wasn't expensive, but they said I looked elegant. I sat in the front row, hands trembling, tears rolling through every speech, every hug, every photo. When Evan held my hand on stage, he said, "You did it, Mom. You carried us the whole way." And I shook my head, barely able to speak. "We carried each other," I whispered. I never asked them for anything. I wanted them to be free, to live without guilt or burden. So when the letter arrived, I wasn't expecting it. It was a plain business envelope, hand-addressed, tucked in our tiny mailbox. Inside, a simple note from Evan. "Mom, you spent years giving us everything. It's our turn now." Beneath it was a deed. A modest cottage just outside town. 1 story, a screen porch, a small garden, fully paid for, bought with pooled savings from Evan and Tyler. "A place for you to rest," the note said. "A place that's yours." I dropped to the kitchen floor, the letter still in my hand. Not out of shock, out of relief, because all those nights in the shed, the skipped meals, the tears I cried into a coat I couldn't afford to replace, none of it had gone unnoticed. They saw it. They remembered. 3 months later, I moved into that cottage. Evan planted rosemary by the back door, said it reminded him of home. Tyler built shelves for my cookbooks, set up a small office for my baking orders. Every Sunday, they still come over. We eat, we laugh, we remember. Sometimes I walk through the little garden barefoot, coffee in hand, dew on my toes, and I think back to that first winter in the shed. The night I promised my boys they'd never be alone in the dark again. I didn't have a plan then. I didn't have money. I didn't have support. But I had love, and love, when it's steady, quiet, and fierce, can build things no one sees coming. It can create a home from nothing. It can rebuild a life, 1 brick, 1 breath, 1 act of faith at a time. Today, I bake, I teach, I volunteer. I speak to women starting over, mothers rebuilding after loss, girls aging out of foster care, women who've been told they're too much or not enough. I stand in front of them and say what I wish someone had said to me back when I was living in that shed. You don't have to be loud to be powerful. You don't have to be rich to be worthy. You just have to keep going. Sometimes one stays after to whisper, "Thank you. I thought I was alone." And that's the full circle, because we're never meant to rise in silence and disappear quietly. We're meant to rise and then turn around and reach for the next hand behind us. Strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it looks like holding your breath through a night shift. Sometimes it looks like showing up to a parent-teacher meeting with shoes held together by thread and hope. Sometimes it looks like standing at a bus stop in the snow with two kids who still believe in you. We live in a world that celebrates headlines and hero moments. But I've learned the most powerful victories don't happen on stages or screens. They happen in private, silent acts of refusal, of resilience, of relentless everyday love. And now, as I sit on the porch of the cottage my sons gave me, the home built from all our battles, I can say this with certainty. I didn't win by fighting anyone. I won by refusing to disappear. So if you're watching this, wondering if your pain has purpose, if your love is enough, if your story matters, let me be the one to say, it does. It is. You do. My name is Helena Whitmore, and this is the life I built, with quiet strength, relentless love, and the unshakable belief that dignity is always worth the fight. Tell me your story, if this story touched you, if you've lived through something similar, or if you just needed this reminder today, leave a comment below. I read every single one, and I promise you, you're not alone. Don't miss more stories like this. Hit that like button if Helena's journey moved you. Subscribe for more powerful stories of strength, healing, and transformation. And don't forget to share this video with someone who might need to hear it. Because sometimes, the quietest stories carry the loudest hope.